Celia.
Good morning. Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm Dan Celia. It's great to be here. And we've got not a lot of economic news coming out this week, but we've got a number of things that we certainly want to touch on that I would consider pretty important as we head towards the end of the month. Some very interesting news. Listen, if you're a partner with me on the website, make sure you open your alert this morning. That's very important. But there is some important economic news coming as we look at Russia, Ukraine, Crimea. As we look at all of those, I have a good friend in Ukraine. As you know, I'm supposed to go to the Ukraine the end of the month of September. I'm supposed to be there speaking at a leadership conference. I don't know what that right now. We're still scheduled to go. I don't know how that's going to shake out. But I have several friends there. I've been there many times over the years, and I had a chance to talk with one of them yesterday who lives east of Crimea, and it looks as though things are getting a little scary. So be praying for that country if you think about it. For all the believers, there are a lot of believers in the Ukraine over the last 10 years. It has really had a revival, and be praying for them. But we do have some economic news coming out. And I'm going to go through the economic calendar here, but before that, I want to go to our friend that we try to get to every Monday morning, Sandy Rios. You know her from Sandy Rios in the Morning. She is the AFA's Director of Governmental Affairs, and we sure appreciate Sandy being with us. Sandy, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Dan. Thank you
Good.
for filling in for me on Friday. Did you teach my audience how to spend their money? That's what I want to know.
No, I did not, and it was very uncomfortable. I'm telling you right now. I said, well, here's the thing. They called, I said, look, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. But they said, well, try to talk politics. I said, okay. So, and when I was finished, all I could say is, I am entering into my comfort zone right after the show. So
that's like me. I always say I can talk about anything except sports and dogs. Do not ask me anything about animals or sports.
That's
or I get
funny.
myself in trouble. But now, see, money. Maybe I should add money to the third part of that.
Well,
I'll tell you something. I'd like to know what you think, Dan, about this whole thing of Russia and the money. I was actually touching on this morning on my show. Putin he's smart like a fox, but he's also careless. And I think he's bullish. And this whole business of invading, Ukraine and then taking over Crimea is going to have financial consequences. And you could say, well, he was smart. He thought through to, make the countries of Europe dependent on him for natural gas and oil. But also there's the matter of the stock market, the way everything is interconnected right now.
Yeah.
Isn't he taking a big risk financially by shuffling the dice like this?
I would like to think that he is, Sandy, but here's my take on it. He's got a perfect. There is no better time for him to do this because you've got the European Union and the United States of America both threatening sanctions starting today, and some of those sanctions may include selective asset freezes. But here's the problem. He knows that we, the largest economy in the world, not us, but the largest economy in the world, the Eurozone, if you look at all 27 nations, now there's 28 talking about sanctions, largest economy in the world there, and America, the largest individual country with a huge economy, very, very fragile, incredibly fragile. And if we, and I said this a couple weeks ago when this all started, and I've been writing about it, if we were to declare a total asset freeze on Russia, which would bring him to his knees, by the way. Russia, remember this, Russia is a third world country economically. They may be a military might. They may be a lot of things. They're a third world country economically. All they've got is oil. Yes, 1/3 of it goes to the Eurozone, but 1/3 of their energy goes to the Eurozone. But if our banking system, if we did that, we're going to see a 2,000-point drop in the market. And the Eurozone is going to be the same. Everybody knows that. He knows it. we know that, we will lay out some sanctions because we drew a line and we don't want to be embarrassed again, and we're going to throw out some sanctions. But, Angela Merkel, the same thing. She spoke over the weekend talking about some selective sanctions, meaning I don't know if they're going to go to a total asset freeze because it would kill our banks. It would kill the big five.
Yeah,
and it would have a dramatic impact on the markets.
One thing that's really interesting to me is there is this move all over the world to secede. All these balkanizations. Scotland is going to be voting next week to pull away from England, and Genoa, place in Italy is getting ready to vote to secede from Italy, and Quebec, of course, is always going to secede from Canada as soon as they can. But Dan, the thing that I wonder is have they really thought through the financial implications? How can little countries survive like that? You think this is just zeal for country without wisdom regarding what's going to happen to your finances, your stock market, your currency, and all of that?
It is. I mean, it really is. They have I said this about states, and I said this recently about the state of Oklahoma and other states that are talking about seceding. That's a wonderful thing, but until you need power and you're on the grid that is dependent upon 6 states around you, it's great until you have a Category 5 tornado hit Oklahoma City and you have your hand out to the feds. I mean, they don't think it through. And then the countries around them aren't thinking this through. But I do believe Putin has thought this through because he knows that his economy cannot bear economic sanctions. They can't bear it. They can't bear a freeze of assets. Now, their finance minister said yesterday, well, this will mean that we will default on our loans. In other words, we're not even going to try to pay them. We're going to default on our loans. So America is not going to get the money that we owe them paid back. Well, that wasn't a threat. That was a reminder to America. You better think real hard about this. So it's going to be very difficult. In my opinion, I would love to see the harshest of economic sanctions. Let's fight back as strong as we can without putting a boot on the ground and institute. Will our banks suffer? Yes. Will our economy suffer? Yes. But you know what? At some point in time, Sandy, we've got to let the chips fall where they will. That's why we have the fragile economy that we have, because we've never done that. We haven't done that since this crisis in 2008.
Well, it's very hard to see clearly right now in this world. It's very hard. The lines are not easily drawn. I think even the administration's response to what's going on with Putin has been very interesting to me. They say a few hard things, but they don't say it in a harsh way. I heard Kerry yesterday saying to Lavrov, they're threatening sanctions and all, and to stop visas, et cetera. And then he says, but this is not in any way meant to be a threat.
Right.
Really? It's like the times, they are very confusing.
They really are. And from an economic standpoint, because I'm looking deep at all the numbers, it's a little bit clearer than it is from a geopolitical standpoint. I think times are a little bit clearer, believe it or not. Yeah. The question is not that there's not clarity. The question is, is anyone willing to look at the clarity, or are they more willing to deal with the smoke and mirrors that makes the bad look good and kick the can a little bit further? And unfortunately, that's what fogs up the economic numbers, in my opinion. So,
I read this morning, really interesting. I just read parts of it. George Soros now is publicly saying that the EU is missing a great moment by not holding Putin's feet to the fire. So I think of all the complications of that, Dan. Like, George Soros is a Hungarian who certainly remembers Soviet domination. So I don't know what that means about his feelings about Mother Russia. I think he's probably very sympathetic to communism. But here he is, this big moneyed guy, so he's a total capitalist. And then he comes down saying the EU should be harder on Putin. It's just very intriguing to try to figure out the money, the loyalties, the perspective of all of these people and try to read the signs.
Well, it is. And I wrote an article last week, and I talked about it yesterday on the show. This is a typical, when you look at the EU and the United States of America, This is what, on a much grander scale, obviously, but this is what the Bible speaks about when he says we will become a slave to the debtor. We are a slave to our own debt. We can't be strong, as you pointed out, Carrie, trying to talk strong, but yet saying, I'm not talking strong. We can't be, because we are at the mercy of our debt. We are at the mercy of the banking debt. We are at the mercy of the debt of this country. We're at the mercy of the fragility of the markets that we've created. We're at the mercy of all of that. And it is so difficult to ever take a position of strength when you have all of this on your back. And the EU is in the exact same position we are. I don't want to say they're worse, they're better, they're in the same position. And this is part of the unintended consequence of what we have created here from an economic standpoint, not what has happened, what we have created here. This is makes it more difficult to be. And I said China could win a war against us without firing a shot. They have to say, excuse me, can I get my money back?
Yep.
And, we're going to go into a printing frenzy, trying to print enough to pay back the $1.1 trillion. So, but this is what we've created, and we can't help but be weak.
Yeah, well, I know that that's true. Some others, of course, would argue, as you know, that this whole business of the global economy is the thing that will keep the peace, because there's so much finance at stake. There's money at stake. There's people's livelihoods, so that the money powers that be will stop conflict. Yes. But I'm not sure that's true.
Well, I mean,
I'm not sure they can. I think they would if they could.
Right. That's it. And I'm not sure they can either. There's some validity to the fact that, well, yeah, we've got to be careful. We can't put, how are we going to go to war if, we have to freeze all their assets to do it, which we would if we ever went to war. So does that in turn keep the peace? Look, the inevitable is going to happen at some point in time, and the chips are going to fall and the house of cards is going to come collapsing down. It's just a matter of when and how, I think, at some point in time. But we're in a very, very difficult situation with Russia. And I think, Mitt Romney had it right. Sarah Palin had it right back in 2008 when she talked about one of our biggest threats, when they talked about one of our biggest threats being Putin. And we had a president who pretty much mocked them and said, well, that was Cold War's been over for 20 years.
Dan, the interesting person in the center of this to me is Angela Merkel. Because, Angela was raised in East Germany, and so she knows what Soviet domination was. It's fresh on her mind. I think that's what has made her a strong, clear-thinking leader, because she lived under totalitarianism, and when Germany became free, she's bound to have lots of strong passions about domination, and particularly about Soviet domination. And so here she is, the head of the EU, or at least, a big part of the EU, yes. And she has been silent on sanctions up until this Sunday. Yeah. Because Germany, there's so much at stake financially for Germany, but finally she's speaking out. And my only point is her conscience must be really struggling in the midst of all of this to say what she really feels.
And I think she is an absolutely brilliant leader and has been brilliant for the German economy. But one of the criticism that hasn't happened yet, we'll see this today or tomorrow, she's going to start getting some criticism coming from France and Italy and other places, because Germany, because I believe of her fiscally conservative values, has got themselves to a place where they're probably going to get hurt the least out of the European Union, where the other countries, the second and third largest economy, France and Italy, would get clobbered. Sandy,
very interesting.
It is very interesting, and I thank you so much. It's always great to have this conversation with you, and I know my listeners appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sandy. I sure appreciate you being with us this morning. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Okay, Dan, thanks so much.
You're welcome, Sandy. Sandy Rios in the morning, the hour before this. I hope you'll tune in. We'll be right back after this.
I'm a widow. I've worked for